All right, well, hopefully everybody's in the right spot for the internal audit session. We're going to be discussing how internal audit's role is evolving and kind of changing the scope within multiple organizations. My name is Ryan Howard. I'm with MetricStream as an account manager. I'm proud to be joined by 4 individuals here with a vast amount of experience and knowledge. So really for the session today, we want to leverage some of their thoughts and insights into how audit's role is constantly evolving and changing what they're doing in their organizations today, and maybe planning for the future change as well. Obviously, having this little more intimate room than what we had in the big ballroom, we're certainly encouraging questions. So as Andrew will be walking around with a microphone, my colleague there in the back. So if as one of the panelists is talking, if you have a question, I know Jacqueline, if you attended the CXO session we just had about an hour ago, I know you had some insights and kind of an audit from your perspective, and we'll hear from Bruce, Rachel, and David as well from their insights. But certainly as we're going through, if you have questions, we want this to make this interactive. Feel free to raise your hand, and we'll do that. So we'll start with just some brief introductions. So Jacqueline, I know if those of you attended the previous CXO meeting, you know that you use an internal audit with RBC, but I'll let you start a little background introduction.
Sure. So Jackie Bukaluk, and I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Internal Audit at RBC, based out of Toronto. And like 25 years-ish of internal audit, risk, compliance related experience. So I'll draw from all of that as we go through these questions, not just the last sort of 10 months of my experience with RBC.
Thank you. And also we have David Dunn, who's the EVP and Assistant General Auditor from PNC.
Thank you, yes. I've been with PNC for about 2.5 years. I was with Bank of America before that, with Citizens Bank, and with Capital One. I've got about 25 years of technology and operational risk and audit experience as well. At PNC, I'm responsible for all things technology. In addition to that, it would include cyber risk, fraud, physical security. I also have responsibility for the data analytics and automation function within the audit department, which is sort of an internal service that we provide across the audit department. So fairly wide range of accountabilities.
Thanks. And we also have Rachel Tressy, who's the Chief Auditor from Voya.
Hi, everybody. Rachel Tressy. I joined Voya about 3 years ago, became the Chief Auditor about 10 months ago. Looked nothing like my photo. I get that. Yep. And it wasn't that long ago. But prior to Voya, I was actually with Cigna for 15 years. Within Cigna, I had roles. Are you guys getting background noise?
Just a little.
Okay, sorry. I think they're working on it. I wasn't loud enough before. I had numerous roles at Cigna between internal audit and business. I sort of went full circle in my career there. And prior to that, I was with Ernst & Young. So like Jackie, I'll be drawing from all of those experiences for the conversation today.
And because we want to keep it all financial services, we've got Bruce Edwards, the Chief Audit Executive from the Department of Transportation, join us on stage as well.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bruce, and I've been doing auditing, internal auditing, and external auditing for about 30 years. So I started off with Fortune 200 companies, Sherwin-Williams, SEM, did KPMG, then I went to state government and started an internal audit shop for the state of Maryland. Then I went to the federal government, and they asked me to start an internal audit shop from the ground up. So that's about the bulk of my experience.
Great, thank you. So I think, Bruce, maybe we'll kick it off with you. Maybe just if you each want to share a little bit about how your organizations are handling the kind of evolving changes today within the internal audit and kind of the value you're providing back to the business and executives and the audit board and other organizations, and maybe some of the future planning activities that are going on within your organizations as well.
Well, for Department of Transportation, internal auditing is like a new animal for them. So they're just getting apprised to the benefit of having an internal audit shop within the organization. Before, they would rely on the IG to actually do a lot of their work and investigations. And what transpired was the IG was getting low-lying fruit, things that they could report on a semi-annual report to Congress to ensure that they were a going concern. However, with Department of Transportation, with the internal audit shop, we get a little more, we dive a little deeper into the root causes of what transpires. So it was getting them familiar with the whole audit function, getting a seat at the table, getting them to understand that we're partnering with them, that we're not a got-you organization, but we're an organization that's trying to add value and service to the Department of Transportation. In that we get in, and it didn't go over well at first because when I first got there, I uncovered fraud in the first month that I was there, and we had to let the guy go. So they saw me as the boogeyman from the first couple months because this guy was actually misusing the government credit card to the tune of about $6,700 a month. And we were able to find out and track what he was doing. He was saying he was working while he was running his own business, and while he was supposed to be teleworking, he was in San Mateo, California, conducting some business. So getting them to understand the value of what is brought to the table with an internal audit and internal control function was the major feat that we had to deal with in starting the internal audit department. From that point on, now they call on us to look at stuff. When we did this 5 years ago, they didn't want any part of us, but now they're sharing. We're at the table looking at decisions. Some of the things the administrator, to give you an idea of the structure, I report to the administrator, who reports to the Secretary of Transportation, who reports to the President. So the administrator does not always want to sign off on certain things unless I have a chance to look at it along with his legal counsel. I don't know how far you want me to go, but I can stop right there.
That's fantastic, yeah.
Because I could go into a lot of stories, but I can stop there.
Yeah, Rachel?
I was going to say that's a tough act to follow, but I will try. A little bit of a different situation. So when I joined, we actually had a really good traditional internal audit team, but we were very traditional. So, and our business is going through rapid change, as I'm sure most of your businesses are. So what we did is we had to start an initiative to change. I didn't want to call it a transformation initiative because I can't stand those words. I think they're overused. So we actually embarked on what we're calling modernization. And we're looking at our skills on our team. We're looking at the tools that we use, and we're looking at the ways in which we use those tools. And we're doing it from the ground up. So every single member of our team is participating. Let me give you an example. One of the key buzzwords I know you all hear, let's be agile, right? Let's figure out how to use the agile methodology. Well, having me tell the team how to use agile wasn't going to be helpful at all. So we actually have a very small team of 5 within our group who are trying to figure out how we are going to use agile as a team. And they love it, and they're creative, and they're thinking about ways to do it that we won't spin ourselves around the axle and not make any progress. But they're building it, and they're rolling it out to the team. So we're finding that in order to make these changes, we actually need different skills across our team. So the ways in which we hire and the skill sets that we look for are very different than the traditional. But you have to still value the traditional, right? Because even though the business is changing and everybody's talking about analytics and using data, a lot of our business processes still don't. So we have to find that balance between getting faster and being able to use the analytics, but still being able to support the traditional business. So it's been quite the journey for the team. Not everything goes smoothly. We can't expect all of our auditors to be everything to everybody. You know, if I ask somebody to learn Alteryx or a new tool, sometimes I get a little bit of a deer in the headlights look. Sometimes that's me, quite frankly. But some of our younger folks who've just come in off the street can teach us, and that's been the most fun for us. I think as we continue to evolve, we're going to need to make sure that we're balancing the skills across the team and valuing all of those skills differently. I think I'll stop there for now.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
David?
I think our experience is very similar, and it's probably a challenge that everyone is facing in one way or another. We had a very traditional audit shop as well, and I think that we're trying to do a couple of different things. One is that notion of, do we have the right processes and methodology in place? We had I wouldn't call it check the box type work, but it was getting pretty stale. And we wanted to make sure that we were staying risk-based. So really taking a hard look at how we went about sort of identifying the audit universe and thinking about risk in the corporate risk framework and making sure that we were aligning to that and not sort of speaking some different language, I think was something that we were looking at. The other was trying to do more automation, trying to use more data. We had absolutely all access to all data, which was great. I know coming from other banks, sometimes getting access to all the data is hard, and you do a lot of arm wrestling and a lot of escalation. You're trying to get access to data. We didn't have that problem. We had all of the data. We weren't doing anything with it. We had it. And so we were putting a lot of effort around how do we start to use it in a way that adds value, allows us to maybe differentiate risk at a more granular level. And then the third thing I would say is around the skill sets, which is so important. They are changing. The auditor of today is not the same as the auditor of 20 years ago, and it won't be the same as the auditor of 20 years from now. So we're putting a lot of effort into how do we start changing that core competency skill set of an auditor so that we break down the silos of specialization, right? But at the same time, build out that, that expected minimum level of capability so that someone can go out and not be afraid to touch technology, not be afraid to touch data, and think about it in the context of business risk. That's a lot to move an organization. We have 550 auditors at the bank, so it's a pretty large group of people, and we're trying to move in that general direction and not alienate those folks who've been there for a long time, but trying to get them to change their skill sets while we go out and hire new skills. But that's kind of one of the biggest challenges that we're facing.
I think my experience is pretty similar, except we're not building a structure. Should we all go on?
Oh, what? I'm just glad everybody else heard that humming noise. I thought it was just me for a second. So.
Now I'm on. Why don't I just use the hand?
Yeah. Just.
You've got me on. So I would say my experience both with RBC and previously and through the industry is probably pretty consistent in that everybody is transforming internal audit. Everybody is on this same journey, and how we're all approaching it is actually quite similar. One of the unique things I think that differentiates some of the successes that I've seen is where the organization with an internal audit actually partners with the business to accelerate some of the changes that they want to achieve. So for example, situations where internal audit is partnering with the risk and compliance team through that integrated risk management, through a common risk taxonomy, but actually working through that together. I've seen some really great successes, and it's really accelerated the risk culture within the organization. Another example is where organizations that I've seen have partnered their analytics capability within internal audit with that of the organization. So actually leveraging the great technology, great minds that are doing analytics work already in the business to bring that expertise into the internal audit department. First thing, to upskill the department, but then secondly, to accelerate the whole analytics journey within the function.
That also demonstrates to the business that there's actually true value because you're actually partnering with your business partners, and they're actually getting some great continuous monitoring tools as a result of that partnership. So those are some of the areas that that I wanted to highlight as kind of unique opportunities to accelerate that transformation and really see meaningful benefit. And then lastly, I'll just comment on the talent piece. And we've all talked about how we're evolving that model. And one of the real key differentiators is looking at the talent model, not in terms of how you're actually going to get coverage over your audit universe, but what skills and capabilities do you need to address those existing and emerging risks. And so when organizations have attrition and people leave the internal audit department, actually standing back and looking at how we can get appropriate coverage over those risks is a game changer, because it's not just filling a box in an org structure. It's deploying resources on a much more holistic basis depending on the need.
Yeah, oh yeah, absolutely, yeah.
I thought that was really good.
Your mic should still work. It's okay, go ahead, you can pass it.
You hold that. I didn't know if they'd explode if they were near. No, I think that the comment about partnering, right? I mean, 20 years ago, partnering was a bad word in internal audit, right? We don't partner. And today, I think you have to partner. I think that the notion
years, and did we find it?
Exactly.
So those are the things that we started for this year. They're new. I'll tell you, they're still developing, but I think it's a step in the right direction for us.
My perspective is a little different than the corporate side because very politically motivated in what goes on in the government. And when we do an audit, one of the things is to keep my boss out of the Washington Post, keep him from going to Congressional Hill and have to sit before a joint committee and explain where the appropriated dollars went. So it's a little, the drive for what we do is a little different than what we did in the corporate world because we're partnering with them. We have 50 some offices all over the country. Our mission is to save lives and reduce fatalities on the highways, the U.S. highways. So they actually engage in the truckers and the motor carriers of people who are transporting people. So we make sure that those rigs are safe. We make sure that the buses are up to standard so they won't lose their brakes and hit your brother, your sister, and lose their lives. So ours is like a real boots on the ground thing. So we really are looking at whether or not that money is being used appropriately to the state partners in order to ensure safety in the transportation on your highways. So it's a little politically driven as opposed to dollar and cents. We're looking at lives. We're not looking at dollars.
Yeah, that's great. And I think, as we're talking about Audit's evolving role being the title of the session that we have, and I think Jacqueline touched on this a little bit in the CXO roundtable about the opportunity now that maybe Audit has to, and I'll open it up to the rest of the panel too, to maybe talk about some of the opportunities you see to maybe change Audit's involvement, directly impact business decisions as they're being made, or providing that information back to the business as well, not just be the third line of defense, we'll say, but be a partner with the other lines as well. So I'll ask you guys to maybe comment on some of those opportunities you're seeing.
Well, there's tremendous numbers of opportunities to do that. I think, as I mentioned before, the notion that we sort of break down the silos is really important. And from what we try to do is look at ourselves as having two primary responsibilities. One is to provide reasonable assurance to the board and to executive management that the risk management and control environment is safe and sound and being operated adequately. But also to be a trusted business advisor. And that's really through relationship building. It's about, I say this to my team all the time. I said, the only time that anyone in the business hears from you is when you have an audit issue or you're delivering some sort of, bad news. They probably don't want to talk to you very often, right? So you need to get with them and, celebrate good news. We had this kind of antiquated process not too long ago where we only required exit meetings for less than satisfactory audit results. And I said, well, why would you do that? I mean, why not go when you have something to celebrate, right? Yes. That it's satisfactory and maybe there's no issues and, hey, you're doing a really great job at managing your space. If we don't celebrate that, no one is going to for us. So, but it's about building those relationships, building trust, building credibility. All of those things, I think, get us to the table. It gets us to the table, and then when you're at the table, don't just sit there and take notes. Participate. Bring an idea. Demonstrate that you understand the business. Demonstrate that you understand maybe more of the nuance of whatever that topic may be, and I think you'll see your phone start to ring. Because, just asking for it, hey, invite me because, you guys never invite me, and I think you should. That's not really enough. You need to just kind of earn it, and demonstrate that value, and it takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. So I think that's, when we can get there and they're calling us and you're participating fully in those conversations, I think that's where the value lies.
Yeah, the trusted business advisor concept feels so natural for some, but so foreign for others. In some ways, it's kind of basic. If you've ever been on the business side, that's what you do, right? It's the way you have to operate. We actually brought the team together from from a training perspective, everybody read the book, Trusted Business Advisor. We talked about it, and we're now trying to bring, when we get a seat at the table, we're trying to bring our newer team members with us to participate at the table too. Because I think there's this perception, whether it's what they learned in their textbooks or maybe the company they came from before, that that's not auditor's role. Audit's role is to be the police or the really stern one, or we've got to get people out of their comfort zone and realize you can actually be a trusted advisor and not lose your independence. That's normal. But to both of you said, people used to be afraid they'd lose their independence if they had a rapport with business partners. So
One of the most important things is the tone at the top. You have an organization that's going to support partnering, and they have what I call the captains and generals to fall in line into that concept. But if you don't have, if the tone at the top is not permeating that thought that the audit operation is a partner to us, you're going to have a hard way to go, because the generals and the officers who are in place between the person that's at the top and what you're trying to do, who have really business operation control, can put forth a barrier of resistance to get things done. So it's a dance and dichotomy. They talked about getting in new talent, and the talent that they already had to retain or maintain in their operation. The ones that have been around for a while, they do not like changing that much. They're locked in to how things work. And to get them to move from square one to square two takes a lot of work, and it has to really be supported from the top.
The thing I would add there, and you mentioned it, around some of the maybe less seasoned auditors, some of the newer folks, I have seen over the years a resistance to have them come to the table, right? So we think, they can't talk to anybody until they're a manager or a senior manager or whatever. I just don't subscribe to that. I mean, I just think that the earlier you can put people in those positions, and you can go with them, make sure that you're supporting them, they're not going to fall on their face, but it's okay if mistakes are made. I think you can't be afraid to sort of try, and maybe it doesn't come out perfect, or maybe you can't overcome that objection to that issue right away. But that's how you learn. That's how you develop. And I think that this notion that some of the junior folks shouldn't go to any of these meetings until they get to a certain level. When they get to that level, they don't know what to do.
right.
And I think it also hurts their credibility, right? Where we can start building that credibility earlier. And it's just through those routines and making sure that everyone is kind of pulling in the same direction on that tone at the top and that strategic direction. I just think it's really, really important.
I was just reflecting on the whole comment about internal audit being a trusted business advisor, and just because we say it doesn't actually make it so.
What?
I know. So, but we say it a lot, but we have to live it. We have to be it. And there's lots of things that we have work to do to actually demonstrate that we have, that capability, that mindset to actually be a trusted business advisor. And, some of it comes down to branding, but it's internal to internal audit as well as external to the business. So on the internal side, you mentioned that it's hard to bring some of the auditors who have been doing the same thing for decades along that path. So if you've been doing the same thing,
Not really the auditors.
the business.
It's the business process.
Yeah.
It was getting them to understand that we're not the gotcha guy.
Right.
And they're locked into seeing the
old
traditional
thinking.
auditor coming in, and they got to guard themselves. They have to put a barrier around their operation to ensure that we don't write them up and threaten their prosperity because we're going to find something that's not correct.
Yeah.
Those are the ones. That's where I'm really
educating the
focusing.
business. So
Yes.
I've also seen where we need to still do some education within internal audit. And changing the mindset of internal audit that we're not the gotcha. We can talk about how we want to be business advisors, but if we're not showing that, and one of the ways that you can do this is through talent swaps, where you take somebody from the business and you
put them in internal audit and vice versa, and both of them get to see the other side. And you know, you've got an advocate now for internal audit back in the business one day who understands, you know, that it's not all about gotcha, and audit's mission really is to be that business advisor.
No, that's perfect. We got a few minutes left, so we'll open up for some more questions that you all might have.
I'm particularly interested in Mr. Edwards' experience, but this definitely applies across all four of y'all with change management. I'm really curious to hear about your experiences in changing that. What practical advice might you have for achieving that, you know, same vision? My boss calls it same team, same jersey initiative. We're working on that same issue in our company. So wondering how you achieved that, how all of you have achieved that in your organizations, and how we might take some learnings from that.
One of the things that transpired in transportation is that they get regulated and audited by GAO and other folk. So when we put in our audit plans and actually look at what is at risk with the organization, I can speak loud enough, I'm good. What transpires is that we did an audit in the medical programs where we look at the health and welfare of the truckers who actually operate the rigs on the highway. We did an audit and we found some issues that needed to be addressed, and we brought them forth to management, and we took some of the information from an RN who was on staff and actually used that information to put it in our report to better the medical program for the department. When the outside entity came in to audit us, they could not really find anything different than what we found, and they couldn't say that, you know, they were negligent. All they could say is that, yeah, we found this issue, but management has already addressed it through their internal audit, through their Office of Internal Audit, which gave credibility to us, helping them along the way to get on a path to where they need to be. So it opened up a lot of doors and opportunities for us. They'll call for us to help, to look at situations and circumstances that are going on in the department, to help them get to a place where they're not adversely looked at. So that's how that transpired.
Yeah, I would say from a practical standpoint, there's a few things that I think are really critical for any kind of, you know, change initiative. One is having a pretty clear articulation of the vision. What do you want end state to look like, or future state, right? And it needs to be in a fairly easily digestible form, something that's easy for people to get their arms around and understand, and easy to articulate so that you can string it into as many of your different routines as possible, right? So that there's this connection back to where are we trying to go. And then the other two things I would say is, one, say what you mean and mean what you say. And the third one is consistency. Nothing kills credibility like inconsistency. So 2 and 3 are kind of related. But I think that those, if you stick to that, you can drive change. Yeah. And it doesn't happen overnight. So don't give up.
I don't, Rachel or Jacqueline, anything to add to that?
The only thing I'd add is, and I tell my team this all the time, you're only as good as the last auditor that left that person's office. And if that business person did not have a good experience, or they think they didn't have a good experience, you're starting from a couple of steps back. And if you go into that conversation assuming that you need to prove yourself every time, and hopefully you know that person enough to know you either, based on their personality, you lighten the mood, or you go in really serious and show how smart you are. Hopefully you can have an opportunity to know who you're dealing with. But the more you can prove what you can do, the better off you are. If you go in assuming you're going to get credibility based on your title or your role, it's going to be a rough meeting.
Never happened.
That never happens. It doesn't. So.
Another,
We've all talked about the fact that and all of you as well, have talked about how internal audit is transforming. So don't be afraid to actually think about how you're managing change within internal audit. You know, having somebody whose mandate is to actually move that function along in terms of driving the strategy, driving the vision, ensuring there's consistency, you know, all of the things that David mentioned, but actually, you know, consciously driving that transformation and that change management. And change is incremental.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, it's little snippets constantly. I think Sarah today on the panel said, you know, you have to repeat things 6 times for it to actually sink in. So thinking about the different ways that you need to demonstrate, communicate, all of the things that you're trying to achieve.
Okay. Another question?
So all of you talked about the changing skill sets that are needed within audit. I'm curious how you've addressed that from a couple standpoints. Have you changed your staffing models for how long you try and keep people within the group? And from both an external recruiting and internal skill development training, particularly on the training side, have you had success in developing those new skills with existing staff, or have you had to mostly look to a replacement type strategy?
So mine's a hybrid. It's a combination of things. When we have a vacancy, we step back and we look at the skills we need at that point in time. We actually had one scenario where I had an IT auditor who posted for a data analytic position that we were bringing in for the first time. So he moved from one role to another, and he blossomed. He's doing beautifully. It's a better fit from a skill set perspective. The other thing we did, and our team built this, is we put a skills matrix together and we all assessed ourselves. And we determined where we have gaps and where we have opportunities. And now we have a training committee made up of people on our team who, based on the skills matrix and based on where we are as an overall team, they put a training agenda, I hate that word, but a training plan together where we do training blasts. We give them a 3-minute video every couple of weeks. We have an hour-long session that somebody speaks live. It's a combination of all things. But we are recruiting a little bit differently, and we're trying to treat ourselves as one team instead of individual silos.
Yeah, I would
We're
agree.
getting a high five, I think. Sorry.
No, go ahead. We got 5 minutes.
Okay.
I would agree with all of that. We're doing very similar things. The skills matrix idea and the self-assessment, and then how that kind of feeds your hiring decisions and backfill decisions and things of that nature is important. I think the one thing that I would say that we're trying to do is not leave it with the training, but also changing the way that we operate. So we do a lot of integrated audits, which forces teams together, which allows for knowledge sharing, and it reinforces things that we do in the trainings. One of the things we did with data analytics, for example, for years, that was pretty much an order and fulfillment type of arrangement, right? The business would say, hey, I need you to build me something so I can test X, and that's what they would go and build. Whether that was the right thing to build, whether that was really that impactful, whether it was really, the right way to go about testing for that, no one ever challenged, because the people on my team didn't know enough to push back, and the folks who were asking didn't really understand what the capabilities of the data people were, so they didn't really know what to ask for. We changed that operating model so that we embedded those folks, and they got to spend time from soup to nuts through planning, through engagement planning, and they started to understand each other's worlds. So now they're organically coming up with different ways to test for things that they would have never thought of before. So yes, we gave everyone a lot of training on data to sort of give them a primer on data analytics, but they're not going to remember that later. It's the reinforcing through operationally changing the way that they actually talk to each other. I think it adds a lot of, reinforcement to the training.
We've been pleasantly surprised at the number of experienced auditors who've stepped it up and like this new thing. They like what they're doing and what we're asking them to do. So we have had some who've self-selected and said, this is not for me. But most people are saying, I want to be this kind of auditor, which is great to see.
One of the things that we really focus on is not just developing skills for today, but building skills for tomorrow. So we're developing leaders, we're developing talent for the bank. And if we bring somebody in from the business or bring somebody in who's a data scientist or a process engineer, I can teach them how to audit. But you know, finding those people who have that curiosity, that mindset to actually take that role is the exciting part.
We're just trying to keep auditors and stuff. We're a new organization for about 5 years, so we're not mature like some of my colleagues' audit operation are. So we're primarily just trying to fill our skill sets so we can do what we need to do on our job. So that's the task, is being able to get the appropriated funds to get the people on board that we need.
Okay. Well, fabulous. Well, thank you, panelists, for your time. We appreciate the questions. Certainly, as you can through the app, as we've talked about through the summit, if you'd like to connect with any one of our four panelists and continue the discussion, we certainly encourage that. So thank you again for your time. Appreciate it.